The intersection of film and social impact is possibly my favorite area of film studies, looking at how social issues such as war, racism, and sexism affect film, and how films affect these social issues right back. Growing up Arab, I noticed that there were almost no people who looked like me in the movies or TV shows I watched. Truly, almost no one. It made me feel kind of lonely and different from my peers. I'm older now, but I still carry that feeling with me. I noticed the lack of Arab representation in almost all the media I consume. However, I find that film discussions often do not acknowledge this topic, even in discussions regarding race or racist depictions on screen. In an attempt to start a conversation, I want to analyze Arab representation in film. I want to ask and hopefully answer two primary questions. How often is there Arab representation in Western cinema, and what does that representation look like? I want to focus first on the more numerical side of representation. How many popular films in the 21st century have Arabs actually been a part of? I have two ways to measure this. First, I'm going to look at the top 10 highest grossing films from 2000 to 2023 and see how many feature an Arab character. This does not include any Arab actors playing characters of a different race. So for instance, Rami Malek as Freddie Mercury in Bohemian Rhapsody does not count. However, white actors playing Arab characters will be included, as we see with The Mummy Returns. My other measurement will be award show recognition, specifically the Oscars. How many people of Arab descent get nominated? I will be focused on acting, not just behind the scenes work, since this is about the way Arabs are portrayed on screen, not how they're treated behind the scenes. This is the data regarding representation in the 10 highest grossing films from 2000 to 2023. As you can see, Arab representation is uncommon in this time frame among popular films, with only 4 films in the 23-year time frame, or 1.7%, including an Arab character in a leading or supporting role. For the Oscars, we're looking at the 4 Oscar categories for acting: Best Actor in a Leading Role, Best Actor in a Supporting Role, Best Actress in a Leading Role, and Best Actress in a Supporting Role. 5 people get nominated for each category, so it's 20 nominees a year, or 230 in the 23-year period. In that time, there have been 2 nominees that have been of Arab descent, or 0.00443%. As this data shows, there is a severe lack of representation of Arabs in the biggest and most acclaimed films of the 21st century. This lack of representation, I believe, is also prominent in 20th century cinema and in more niche films as well. Even in the limited films that do center around Arabs or Arab culture, those cast are often white and lacking any ancestry connecting them to the region. In Cleopatra 1963, Elizabeth Taylor, who was of American and British descent, was picked to play the Egyptian queen. In 1932's The Mummy, a film that centers around Egyptian archaeology and ritual, once again the main characters are played by actors of primarily European descent. Boris Karloff, who was of British and Indian ancestry, played the titular mummy, who in real life was an Egyptian high priest. Zita Joanne, an Austrian-American, was cast as Helen Grosvenor, an Egyptian-American. Additionally, she played the role of Princess Ankhesenamun, a real-life Egyptian queen. Even classics such as Lawrence of Arabia did this. British actor Alec Guinness played Prince Faisal, who was the King of Iraq from 1921 to 1933. The aforementioned 2001 film The Mummy Returns also has an all-white cast playing Egyptian roles. These are just a handful of examples. This trend has kept actual Arabs from participating in Western cinema for decades. There are times, though, when Arab actors get to play Arab characters in films. This can be a positive thing. It puts those actors more into the mainstream, a world where few people of Middle Eastern or North African descent ever get to break into. While having any Arabs on screen seems like a positive development, the quality of that screen time can be severely lacking, producing one-dimensional characters or a stereotypical villain. Arabs in films are almost overwhelmingly limited to a specific archetype, the terrorist. These characters are not given depth or motive beyond a hatred for the West and an extremist perspective on Islam. They are violent mobs that serve as a collective villain for the Western protagonists to fight against. The fact that the Arab terrorists are almost always in groups is telling. Where a singular character, it doesn't speak so much about the people as a whole, rather on the actions of the one character. However, when there is a mob of Arabs rioting with their guns, chanting in Arabic and defacing American flags, it speaks about an entire people, categorizing them entirely as violent or unsalvageable, and in need of American interference and guidance to function. It speaks on their race as Arabs, but also their identity as Muslims. While not every Arab is Muslim and not every Muslim is Arab, Western films set up Islam and Arabs as almost synonymous with each other, a wholly inaccurate and damaging stereotype of its own. What's worse is how these violent portrayals showcase Islam as a religion based upon regression and oppression. The 2000 movie Rules of Engagement is a good example of this. The violent Yemeni protesters in the beginning of the film are revealed to have a tape condoning violence in the name of Islam.
To kill Americans and their allies, both civil and military, is duty of every Muslim who is able.
Western audiences that know little about Islam are meant to be horrified by the tape. They might see this as a realistic depiction of Muslims. It's an obvious instance of a film portraying Muslims as inherently violent and using that to justify America's endless wars and killings in the Middle East. It is the frequency of the terrorist archetype that is the most damaging. It is a challenge to think of a film in the 2000s with Arab characters at all, and it is near impossible to think of one where that Arab character isn't a villain. When that is the only time Western viewers get to see Arabs on their screen, it creates and reinforces the idea that all Arabs are gun-toting, America-hating, Islamic extremist terrorists, and that the real damage that the United States does on Middle Eastern soil is in fact completely justifiable. Costuming is critical in reading how Arabs are portrayed on screen. Traditional Arab clothing adds to the storytelling of these films, and nothing represents Arab culture and clothing better and more concisely than the scarf. Keffiyehs or shmogs are styles of scarves found all across the Middle East, easily recognizable for their intricate grid-like stitching. The scarves come in all varieties of colors, though the most popular ones are white, black, brown, and red. These scarves are ubiquitous in films featuring Arab characters, especially when those characters are terrorists. Wearing the scarf shows characters' pride in their Arab identity, and that is often spun by the narrative as dangerous, a show of Islamic extremity or supremacism. It can obstruct the face, making the bad guys even more frightening, ominous, and more importantly, interchangeable with his fellow Arabs. On the flip side, good Arabs, such as Yinsen from Iron Man or Salah from Raiders of the Lost Ark, who are useful to the white protagonist, do not don a scarf. Instead, they get to wear a more Western outfit, something cleaner, more fitted, and more expensive than the bad Arabs. Their affinity with Western clothing is a reflection of their Western values. They get to dress more civilized because they've earned it by aiding the white main character on their mission. They rise above the more traditional clothes of the other Arabs in the story. This choice of costuming creates a strong association between traditional Arab dress and terrorism, and that is not without its societal consequences. There are countless recent instances of people wearing keffiyehs and getting into trouble, losing their jobs, getting physically attacked, or made to apologize. They are seen as terrorist sympathizers. There is an assumption of wrongdoing or danger tied to wearing an Arab scarf, which can be partly attributed to the irresponsible usage of traditional Arab clothing in Western films. One of the most damaging things a film can do is downplay or normalize the dangers of racism. Casual racism can be very problematic in films that do not seek to call out the bigotry. It can be a very useful tool in films dealing with racism as a theme, but that is often not the case. In many films that feature Arabs as terrorists or as bad guys, there's a great deal of casual racism thrown in. American military personnel stand together and talk about their targets in dehumanizing language repeatedly, referring to the entire group as savages, bad guys, or terrorists. Occasionally, they might throw in a slur as well. One case study of this comes in the form of the 2014 film American Sniper. American Sniper is about a Navy SEAL named Chris Kyle who did multiple tours in Iraq before being killed by an American veteran in 2013. The film is based on a memoir of the same name written by the real Chris Kyle in 2012 about his tours in Iraq during the Iraq War and his reputation as a particularly accurate sniper. The film flaunts Kyle as a hero, a talented marksman just trying to defend the United States. However, what's telling is the filmmaker's decision to portray Kyle as a hero figure when in his memoir he's inclined to say incredibly racist things about Arabs. Kyle wrote in his memoir, quote, "I hate the damn savages, I couldn't give a flying fuck about the Iraqis." He showed a firm belief that every single person he killed was a bad person. Kyle described killing as fun and as something that he, quote, loved. Despite this, the film glorifies Kyle. The ending makes sure to let us know that he was honorably discharged. Multiple characters throughout the film let us know how badass he is and how he's just a good guy protecting his country. The movie is interspersed with Kyle being soft and loving with his wife. He is the heroic protagonist the audience is meant to root for. There are real-world consequences to this kind of behavior being glorified on the screen. After American Sniper's release in 2014, the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee reported that threats against Arabs and Muslims had tripled just after the film's theatrical release, most notably on social media. A massive amount of hate speech on Twitter spawned from the film's release. These tweets were compiled a month after the film's release. On top of social media, some media responses were also discriminatory against Arabs and Muslims. Fox News' Todd Starnes said about the film, quote, "I'm no theologian, but I suspect Jesus would tell that God-fearing, red-blooded American sniper, 'Well done, thou good and faithful servant, for dispatching another godless jihadist to the lake of fire.'" American Sniper serves as a perfect example of how a film glorifying a racist message or character can lead to a dangerous outburst of hate speech against certain racial groups. Over the past few decades, there has been a substantial push for increased diversity in Hollywood. Every year, around award season, the internet explodes with complaints about how white the nominees are for every single category. There are complaints about how so many films take on a whitewashed perspective, or about how writing rooms centered on marginalized stories don't include writers of that community. There has been a tremendous change over the years, and it looks as though Hollywood is beginning to take these complaints seriously. Most would agree that there has been an increased dedication to diversity in Hollywood, and some notable improvements in that area. However, when you take a step back and really look at Hollywood now, is it that much more diverse than before? Sure, some groups have seen a boost in representation. There's been an increase in media starring Asian Americans, for example. LGBTQ+ representation is far more frequent than ever before. These are wonderful developments, but there are a lot of marginalized communities that have not had the same experience. Personally, I don't think Arab representation has improved since my childhood. I still can't name a film that has come out in my lifetime that has made me feel adequately represented, that has taken the initiative and care to craft a story about the Arab experience in a nuanced way. I can barely think of any films that have Arab actors. They're usually reserved for the war epics or formulaic good guy versus bad guy action flicks. Diversity is still a massive issue in Hollywood, and furthermore, discussions of diversity often exclude certain groups. This makes it an even bigger struggle to get certain types of people on the big screen. If no one even acknowledges that it's a problem, how is it supposed to get better? So then how do we begin to fix this diversity issue? Obviously, there's no way to fix everything all at once. It will take decades and decades of social change before Arab representation in Western cinema will be in a good place. We can continue to talk about it, to acknowledge that it is in fact an issue, and push for studio execs to do better. However, this is a grueling process that will take years. As for now, there is at least one thing that can help undo the implicit bias against Arabs perpetuated by cinema, and that's to purposely consume films and television created by Arabs and Arab Americans. Films made in Lebanon, Syria, Iran, Egypt, Palestine, and other Arab countries are the keys to seeing a new side to Arab representation in film. Their Arab characters are three-dimensional and nuanced. Their cameras pick up not just destroyed buildings, but the scenic and unique landscapes of the Middle East, as well as their unique art, clothing, and food. The filmmakers and actors are artists telling a story often deeply embedded in Arab culture, a culture that Western audiences do not often get to see. Media made by Arab Americans is also deeply valuable, as they often detail the struggles that Arabs face in the United States, whether it be casual discrimination, the difficulty retaining their culture in a Western environment, or the rampant Islamophobia and racism. TV shows such as Rami or Mo tell these stories in a deeply sympathetic and honest way. While it's not a fix-all, I believe that Western audiences should make a concerted effort to find films and television that will give them a new perspective on Arabs, and I truly believe that this can lead to a lot of positive change in the Western film industry and in the public's perception of Arab people. The issue with Western portrayals of Arab people is that they are treated as Arabs instead of characters who happen to be Arab. Their identity informs and becomes their character. No additional depth is added, stereotypes are rarely challenged, and viewers may be so accustomed to it that they don't notice a problem. There needs to be a collective demand for increased diversity and more honest representation of Arabs in Western cinema. As it stands now, there's a deficiency in Arab roles, and the ones that we do have are often steeped in stereotypes and bad faith. Through analyzing the media we consume more closely and noticing how representation ranges from negative to non-existent, the problems become more evident, as does the need for change.